Hello and welcome back to the Green Dream video series. Today I'm joined by Stephen Lang, who works at Pollination. Thank you very much for coming in today.
Pleasure.
Firstly, could you tell us a bit about what you do?
Yep, so Pollination is a global advisory and investment firm that is purely focused on transition to net zero nature positive. I'm a managing director in our London office, focused on food and fibre systems, and very specifically scaling regenerative food systems.
Okay, and we need to see drastic transformation in those food systems in order to meet 1.5 degrees. What does that look like? What do we need to see?
I think it's important to frame the problem first.
Okay.
So food systems are responsible for 30% of global emissions, use 70% of the world's water, drive the majority of the world's nature loss. We have 500 million farmers that are working on degraded land and will increasingly struggle to drive yield. And at the same time, less than 3% of climate finance is flowing to those farmers. So it's a problem of global proportions. It's estimated that about 100 billion plus per year is needed to transition those systems. So I think what we need in the next 5 years, 5 to 10 years, are probably three things. One, transformative partnerships, public and private sector partnerships that shift incentives in the system so that farmers can transition. Second, we need transformative finance, a massive scaling up of philanthropic development and private sector capital. And we also need at scale proof points of regenerative systems at landscape scale. And all of that needs to be in service of farmers who need to be economically empowered, supported, enabled to drive the transition. So it's no small undertaking.
Where can investors play a part in this?
Many places. I think if you look at what's happening on the concessional finance side, there are more and more pools of capital now becoming available from philanthropy and from development finance. So I think I would encourage investors to participate creatively in blended concessional structures. The reality is that as systems degrade, there will be lower risk, more reliable returns from regenerative systems. So I think participating in blended structures is one. I would also encourage investors to reassess the systemic risk associated with non-regenerative systems. I think we'll see more and more shocks in the system that relate to that systemic risk. So I'd encourage a reassessment of risk.
Yeah, that's definitely something to be mindful of. And you've talked in the past about corporates forming partnerships around regenerative farming techniques. Could you explain a bit about that? Give us some examples, perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, most of the big global food companies, I would say, are now really ramping up their efforts with farmers to pilot regenerative value chains. PepsiCo recently, one example, announced, I think it was a $200 million partnership with 3 growing organizations in the US to transform about 3 million hectares. Walmart are doing some really interesting work to transform value chains. Unilever recently launched their Climate and Nature Fund with AXA and TKO. Sustainable Markets Initiative are doing some really interesting work in their agribusiness task force to develop new financing frameworks. So everyone's active, but we need a real stepping up of effort and capital.
Okay, and that means leads me on to my next question. How can companies work towards being nature positive? It is difficult to measure, but what steps can they be taking now?
I think there's a fairly straightforward sequence of steps to take, frankly. The first is to really understand what are your impacts and your dependencies on nature. Once you understand that, you can better understand risk, particularly risk to revenue and profit. And then I think also think about where are the opportunities to invest in nature-based solutions that build the natural capital that underpins all corporate and economic activity. So those are the 3 things I'd recommend.
Okay, thank you for that. It's great how you've broken those things down for us. So we always end the Green Dream with this question. What is your favourite sustainable drink or snack?
One model I really like is the Natura model.
Okay.
Which is direct sourcing from farmers, box of fresh regenerative vegetables delivered to your door. And what you find with regenerative food is it tastes better and it's more nutrient dense.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you for sharing everything with us. Great to have you in.
Thank you very much, Natalie.